we've started a project in wind power back in 2005. We have now reached the stage of completion of the development stage of the project. This is 300 megawatts of wind power, which makes it the largest, or will make it the largest wind power plant in Africa. It will also represent about 17% of the total installed capacity in Kenya. And in number of installed turbines, that is 365 850 kV turbines, will represent very likely also the largest single wind farm in the world.
That's extraordinary. Can you go into detail in those stats a bit more? First of all, 300 megawatts, how many homes will that power?
Well, in the African context, because it's obviously very different from Europe, in the African context, probably about 1.2, 1.3 million households.
Wow. You spoke about 17% of installed capacity. Is that electricity or energy?
This is, here we're talking about 300 megawatts of installed capacity. In energy terms, that means that we have a 62% yield from the 300 megawatts installed, so we will be delivering between 190 to 200 megawatts of energy per year.
Okay, so is that still 17% of installed capacity? What does that come down to when you take into account when the wind's not blowing or when, you know, that sort of thing?
Yeah, okay. The load factor capacity. Load factor, as I said, is the yield that you actually benefit from every installed megawatt, okay? So we get 62%. 62% is very close to base load. Base load is roughly about 63, 64% in Kenya, which represents what hydro produces. And this is literally a first in the world. Normally wind power, if you take it in the European context, you would probably have an average yield or an average load factor of about 27, 28% or less. On an onshore wind farm like ourselves, we're onshore. And this is, so we are well above double that. And that is why we are economically viable. That is, we are able to sell our energy to the country at a relatively cheap price compared to other sources of energy that the country uses right now, and definitely a lot cheaper than in Europe. In Europe today, I think prices of wind power are in the region of about 11, 12 euro cents per kilowatt hour, and we will be selling at 7.52. So we don't need any subsidies from anybody, really. And in fact, we will be earning carbon credits. We are not taking those carbon credits to our benefit, but we are returning the carbon credits to the country for the benefit of the local communities in the area where we will be developing the wind farm, and they will be entirely spent on development for them.
Thank you. I asked that question because in Europe it's much lower. Tell us a bit more about the challenges in building a wind farm in that area.
Well, the fact that we have spent 8 years in just developing the wind farm, therefore 8 years in producing paper and not much else, tells you the story a bit. 8 years in developing a wind farm means developing and building up the credibility that such a wind farm can be built, such a large wind farm in a very remote area of Africa, one of the remotest areas of Africa. If you were to see some of the images of our wind site, or our site, I always say it reminds me of the pictures I used to see of the moon. Every hill is a crater. It's lava, old lava flows and lava rock everywhere. It's very windy. There's absolutely nothing there. There's no infrastructure. There's no electrical connections. There are no roads. There's no way to host anyone unless you put him in a tent. So we have to build everything. We have to build 205 kilometers of road in order to get our equipment there. We have to, and we are 1,200 kilometers from the nearest deep sea port, which is Mombasa, on African roads, which are not the best in the world. And that's why we're using smaller turbines, precisely because the logistics is so complicated that we would have a real problem in utilizing the larger turbines, which are heavier to transport and everything. Add to that we need to build a transmission line to connect to the grid, and that's a 428-kilometer transmission line to be able to evacuate our power, and it's a 400 kV double-circuit transmission line. So it's very challenging.
What reaction have you had from the local community? Because back in Europe again, there can be a lot of protests about wind, and I know you said it was a bleak area, but it's probably quite beautiful too. Have you had any reaction from people?
Well, to start with, we don't believe we are affecting the beauty of the area because we are not that close to the lake. We are called Lake Turkana Wind Power because that is the most known site, the lake itself. It's a very famous lake, but we are about 28 kilometers east of the lake. That's where the wind farm is coming up. The area is unpopulated. The population density is less than 1 person per square kilometer. Nomadic in nature. We are not going to stop at all the nomadic flow of the local populations because we are not going to be fencing the whole wind site. We will not even be fencing every installation. So there'll still be free passage. We are not disallowing that at all. And I think what we will bring is economic growth to the area. There will be an economic spin-off when you bring power to an area. It is normally always beneficial. We'll try and make sure that it is. And yeah, so we're keen to start.
Lastly, how do you see this rolling out across Africa? Obviously, this is the biggest wind farm in Africa, or will be. Are you working on any new projects, or as an entrepreneur, do you see more potential in the continent for wind?
I think, let me just say this. We are right now developing 300 megawatts on this wind farm. And the total capacity we have on the site we have is probably in the region of 2,000 megawatts. So we're sort of scratching the surface. But you have to maintain, like I said, about 17% of the total installed capacity, or compared with the total installed capacity in the country, we represent 17%, and you have to maintain that ratio. You cannot go too far above that without creating an instability on the network itself, on wind. So as the network and the demand of power grows, we expect to be growing as well, and to try and maintain our marketplace.
At this meeting in Warsaw, a lot of people are talking about, the future and trying to cut emissions in 2020. Do you see a role for renewable energy in Africa?
I think there cannot be a better place than Africa, and we are generalizing, of course, when we talk about Africa. Africa is 58 and odd countries, so to generalize on such a large continent can be tricky at times. But yes, I firmly believe that Africa has very wide spaces still. So renewable energies that may, in densely populated areas such as Europe, cause problems such as solar panels not being nice to look at and that you live close to them, or turbines and things like that, is something that you do not have in that part of the world. In Africa, you have some very wide, open spaces. There's a very large project we know of, which is called Desert Tech, on solar, which is in the Sahara Desert. You're not really disturbing anybody. You're likely to be able to produce a very high amount of energy at very low cost. And provided that you can link it up and you can evacuate it and link up to various networks around the world, I think it's something that we will see growing more and more in Africa. Yes, renewable energy is the future for Africa.